What happens when a daytime television host refuses to play nice with royalty? Well, you're about to find out, because what unfolded on Lorraine's morning show was nothing short of explosive. Before we dive into this incredible confrontation, make sure you hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really triggered this massive fallout. The morning started like any other at the ITV studios. Lorraine Kelly, the Scottish presenter known for her warm demeanor and no-nonsense interviewing style, was preparing for what was supposed to be a routine promotional chat. Prince Harry had agreed to appear on the show to discuss his latest charitable initiative, a mental health awareness campaign targeting young veterans. The booking had been months in the making, with multiple representatives from both sides coordinating every detail. As the cameras rolled and the familiar theme music faded, Lorraine's smile was as bright as ever. Good morning, everyone, and what a special treat we have for you today. Joining me now is Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, who's here to talk about his incredible work supporting our veterans. Harry, dressed casually in a navy blazer and open-collar shirt, settled into the cream-colored sofa across from Lorraine. His posture was relaxed, but those who knew him well might have noticed the slight tension around his eyes. Morning, Lorraine. Thanks for having me. Absolute pleasure, Harry. Now tell us about this new campaign. I understand it's very close to your heart. It really is, Harry began, his voice carrying that familiar earnestness that had endeared him to millions. We're seeing far too many young men and women coming back from service and struggling with the transition. The statistics are frankly heartbreaking, and I felt we needed to do something more direct, more immediate. Lorraine nodded thoughtfully. And this stems from your own military experience, of course. You served 2 tours in Afghanistan. Exactly, I was fortunate to have support systems in place, but not everyone does. We're talking about people who've given everything for their country and then find themselves forgotten. For the first few minutes, everything proceeded smoothly. Harry spoke passionately about the campaign's goals, the partnerships they'd formed with existing veteran organizations, and the innovative approach they were taking to mental health support. Lorraine asked the kind of probing but respectful questions her audience had come to expect. But then something shifted. Harry, I have to ask, Lorraine said, her tone remaining conversational, but with a subtle edge creeping in. There are some who might say that launching another charitable initiative, when there are already so many established veteran support organizations, might actually divide resources rather than strengthen them. What would you say to those critics? Harry's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Well, Lorraine, I'd say those critics might want to look at the actual numbers. We're not duplicating efforts, we're filling gaps. Specific gaps that existing organizations have acknowledged they can't address, right? But there's also the question of your platform, Lorraine pressed on. Some people feel that your various projects, your media appearances, your constant advocacy, it's all become a bit, well, oversaturated. Are you not concerned about charity fatigue? The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. Harry's media training kicked in, but his smile looked strained. I think anyone who's genuinely concerned about veteran welfare wouldn't describe efforts to help as oversaturated. Lorraine, I'm not questioning your intentions, Lorraine replied quickly, though her expression suggested she was just getting started. But surely you can understand why some people might be confused about your priorities. One week, you're in America talking about media intrusion. The next, you're launching a campaign here in the UK. It does seem a bit scattered. Harry's composure began to crack. Scattered. I'm sorry, but helping veterans is scattered. These are people who served alongside me, Lorraine. This isn't some hobby or publicity stunt. Nobody said it was a publicity stunt. Harry Lorraine's voice remained steady, but there was steel underneath now. But you have to admit, there's a pattern here. Every few months, there's a new cause, a new campaign, a new interview where you're highlighting problems, but then you're back in Montecito while other people do the actual work. The accusation hung in the air like a live wire. Harry's face flushed, and for a moment, the carefully constructed public persona slipped entirely. That's completely unfair, and frankly, it's insulting to everyone involved in these projects. Is it though? Lorraine leaned forward slightly. Because I've been doing some research, Harry, and I've spoken to several veterans' charities. They tell me that, while your initial announcements generate a lot of media attention, the follow-through isn't always what they'd hoped for. What exactly are you implying? Harry's voice was rising now, his famous temper beginning to surface. "I'm not implying anything," Lorraine replied calmly. "I'm stating facts. The Invictus Games, which everyone acknowledges, is your genuine success. The story works because you've committed to it long term. But these other initiatives, they seem to flare up in the media and then fade away while you move on to the next thing." Harry stood up abruptly, causing the sound technicians to scramble, as his microphone cord stretched taut. "This is unbelievable. I came here to talk about helping people who've sacrificed everything for this country, and you're turning it into some kind of character assassination?" Lorraine remained seated, her expression unchanged. "Sit down, Harry. We're having a conversation." "No, we're not," Harry shot back. "You're ambushing me with tabloid-style accusations dressed up as journalism. This is exactly the kind of toxic media behavior that made me leave the UK in the first place." The words toxic media behavior hung in the studio air like a challenge thrown down between two fighters. Lorraine's eyes narrowed, and suddenly the warm, motherly presenter that millions of viewers knew disappeared entirely, replaced by someone who'd clearly had enough of being lectured. Toxic media behavior. Lorraine's voice was dangerously quiet now. "Harry, I've been doing this job for over 30 years. I've interviewed prime ministers, celebrities, and yes, plenty of royals. I've never once had someone accuse me of being toxic for asking legitimate questions about their work." Harry was pacing now, his hands gesturing wildly as his frustration boiled over. "Legitimate questions? You're questioning my commitment to veterans based on what? Gossip from unnamed sources? This is exactly the same garbage that drove my mother to despair." The mention of Princess Diana sent a visible shock through the studio. Camera operators exchanged glances, knowing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Lorraine's jaw tightened. "Don't you dare," she said, her Scottish accent becoming more pronounced as her anger rose. "Don't you dare use your mother's memory as a shield when you can't handle being held accountable for your own actions." "Accountable for what exactly?" Harry wheeled around to face her directly. "For trying to help people, for using whatever platform I have left to make a difference." "No, accountable for the mess you leave behind," Lorraine fired back, finally rising from her chair to meet his energy. "Do you have any idea how many people I've had to interview over the past few years, cleaning up after your various pronouncements? Charity workers trying to explain why promised funding never materialized, palace staff defending decisions you've publicly criticized, family members having to respond to your constant complaints." Harry's face went white, then red. "Those people chose to speak to you. Nobody forced them. Of course they had to speak." Lorraine's voice was building to something approaching a shout now. "Because you keep making these grand statements and then disappearing back to California, leaving everyone else to deal with the fallout. It's cowardly, Harry. Cowardly." The word came out as almost a roar. "I served my country in active combat while you were sitting in television studios asking celebrities about their latest projects. Don't lecture me about cowardice. Your military service was admirable," Lorraine shot back without missing a beat. "But that was years ago. What have you done lately besides complain about how hard your privileged life has been?" The studio fell into a stunned silence. Even the usually bustling production team had gone completely quiet, recognizing they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years. Harry stared at Lorraine for a long moment, his chest rising and falling rapidly. "I can't believe you just said that." "Someone needed to," Lorraine replied, crossing her arms. "Everyone's been walking on eggshells around you for so long, afraid to point out that your constant victimhood narrative is getting old. You left the royal family because you wanted freedom and privacy, but you've done nothing but seek attention ever since." "That's not true," Harry's voice cracked slightly. "Everything I've done has been about service, about helping people who don't have a voice." "Has it, though?" Lorraine pressed on relentlessly. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like it's been about settling scores with your family and keeping yourself relevant in a world that's moved on from caring about your grievances." Harry's hands were shaking now, whether from rage or something else entirely. "You have no idea what you're talking about. You have no idea what it's like to lose your mother because of media harassment and then watch the same patterns repeating themselves." "I know exactly what media harassment looks like." Lorraine's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "And asking you direct questions about your work on live television, isn't it? If you can't handle basic scrutiny of your public activities, then maybe you shouldn't be doing television interviews at all. Maybe I shouldn't, Harry snapped. Maybe I should have listened to everyone who warned me that the British media would never give me a fair hearing, no matter what I did. Oh, here we go again. Lorraine threw her hands up in exasperation. The British media. The British media? Harry, you do realize that you've given more interviews to American media in the past 3 years than most A-list celebrities. But somehow, when a Scottish woman asks you tough questions, we're all part of some conspiracy against you. It's not about conspiracy, it's about agenda, Harry fired back. You came into this interview with your mind already made up about me. This was never going to be a fair conversation about veteran support. My agenda is getting honest answers from my viewers, Lorraine shot back. Something you seem incapable of providing without turning it into a referendum on your personal grievances. Personal grievances. Harry's voice went up an octave. I'm trying to help people who are suffering, and you're treating it like some kind of vanity project. Because that's exactly what it feels like. Lorraine didn't back down an inch. You show up, make a big announcement, get your headlines, and then you're gone. Meanwhile, the people doing the actual daily work of helping veterans are left trying. To explain why the prince who promised so much has vanished again, Harry pointed a finger directly at her. That is a lie, and you know it. Is it? Lorraine's eyebrows shot up. Then tell me, Harry, when was the last time you actually visited a veterans facility here in the UK? When was the last time you sat down with actual veterans, not for a photo opportunity, but to do real work? The question hung in the air, and Harry's momentary silence spoke volumes. That's what I thought, Lorraine said quietly, but her words carried across the now completely silent studio like a gunshot. Harry's silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 seconds. In television terms, it might as well have been 10 minutes. The cameras captured every micro-expression, every flicker of uncertainty that crossed his face as he realized he'd been caught in a moment of truth he couldn't spin his way out of. Finally, he found his voice, but it came out strained and defensive. I don't have to justify my schedule to you or anyone else. The work I do happens behind the scenes, away from cameras, behind the scenes. Lorraine repeated slowly, as if tasting the words, how convenient. The work that no one can verify, that leaves no trace, that somehow never makes it into any of your very public updates about your various causes. Not everything has to be a photo opportunity, Harry shot back, but his earlier fire was diminishing, replaced by something that sounded almost desperate. Of course not, Lorraine agreed with mock reasonableness, but surely some of it should be actual opportunity. Harry, I've done my homework. I've spoken to 6 different veterans charities in the past week. 3 of them told me they'd had initial conversations with your representatives about collaboration, but then nothing materialized. 2 others said they'd been promised funding. That never came through. The 6th one hung up on my producer when we mentioned your name. Harry's face went through a series of expressions, confusion, anger, and finally something that looked like panic. Those are isolated incidents. You can't base an entire judgment on a few conversations. A few conversations, Lorraine's voice rose incredulously. Harry, these aren't random people I pulled off the street. These are the organizations actually doing the work you claim to champion, and they're telling me a very different story from the one you're trying to sell. What story is that exactly? Harry demanded, but his voice lacked the conviction it had carried earlier. That you're more interested in being seen as someone who cares about veterans than you are in actually helping them. Lorraine delivered the blow with surgical precision. That your pattern is to announce initiatives that generate headlines, and then leave other people to figure out how to make them work while you move on to your next media appearance. Harry stared at her for a moment, and then something seemed to snap inside him. You know what, Lorraine? I should leave other people to do the work. Clearly, I'm just getting in the way with all my caring and my platforms and my resources. The sarcasm was thick, but underneath it, there was something raw and wounded that caught everyone in the studio off guard. That's not what I said, Lorraine replied, but for the first time her tone softened slightly. Isn't it? Harry laughed bitterly. Because it sounds like you're telling me that everything I try to do is worthless, that my motivations are selfish, and that the world would be better off if I just shut up and disappeared. Harry, Lorraine began, But he cut her off with a sharp gesture. "No, you've made your point very clearly. I'm a disappointment as a royal. I'm ineffective as an advocate. And I'm apparently delusional about my own impact on the world. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that assessment?" Lorraine looked at him for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried a weight of finality that made everyone in the studio hold their breath. "Actually, yes. I think you have the potential to do genuine good in this world, Harry, but not like this. Not with these grand announcements, followed by disappearing acts, not with this constant narrative that everyone else is the problem. If you really want to help veterans, if you really want to make a difference, then stop talking and start doing, consistently, quietly, without expecting applause." Harry stood perfectly still, processing her words. Then slowly, he reached up and pulled off his microphone, the small device making a slight popping sound as it disconnected. "I think we're done here," he said quietly. Actually, Lorraine's voice cut across the studio like a blade. "We are done here. This is my show, Harry, and I decide when interviews end. And this one is ending now." Harry looked at her with something between surprise and grudging respect. "Fine, then I'll save you the trouble of ending it." He started walking toward the studio exit, but Lorraine wasn't finished. "Harry," she called after him, causing him to stop and turn around one final time. "For what it's worth, I hope you prove me wrong. I hope you go back to California and actually build something lasting instead of just building your brand. The veterans you claim to care about deserve better than press releases and publicity tours." Harry stared at her for a long moment, his jaw working as if he were trying to find the right words. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, but somehow carrying clearly across the silent studio. "You know what's funny, Lorraine? Everyone keeps telling me what I should be doing, how I should be living, what my priorities should be. But nobody, and I mean nobody, ever asks what I actually want or what I think might work. Everyone's an expert on my life except me." With that, he turned and walked out of the studio, leaving behind a silence so complete that the only sound was the quiet hum of the studio lights. Lorraine stood in the middle of her set for a moment, watching the door swing shut behind him. Then she turned to face the cameras, her professional composure sliding back into place like armor. "Well," she said to the stunned viewing audience, "I think we can all agree that was not how I planned to spend my morning. But sometimes the most important conversations are the ones we never intended to have." She paused, collecting herself before delivering what everyone watching knew would become one of the most quoted television moments of the year. "That's all we have time for today. I'll see you tomorrow, and hopefully it will be considerably less dramatic." As the credits began to roll and the theme music swelled, production assistants scrambled to figure out what had just happened and how they were going to handle the inevitable media firestorm that was about to engulf them all. But in that moment, in that studio, there was only silence and the lingering sense that everyone had just witnessed something that would be talked about for years to come. So what do you think? Did Lorraine go too far, or was it about time someone held Harry accountable for his promises? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one. What would you have asked Harry if you were in Lorraine's position?